the Nigeria of our dreams, where there will be light at all times. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Information is power. Everyone wants power. So feel power.
President Buhari in Morocco for the Climate Change Conference.
Vice President Oshibajo says party may soon be over in the petroleum sector.
And normalcy restored in Kano State after police-Shiites clash.
Today on Good Morning Nigeria, we'll look at developing infrastructure in a recession.
All right, let's start with this quotation from a Canadian legislator, Scott Bryson. He says, smart investments and infrastructure create jobs and growth in the short term, while also building a more competitive economy that can sustain good-paying jobs and stronger growth in the future, unquote. Now, of course, this is one of the many viewpoints that attest to the importance of infrastructure to the economic development of any nation.
Well, yes, Claire, you're right. As you and I, and indeed other Nigerians are aware, Nigeria's leaders are working around the clock to seek to get the nation out of its current economic recession. Now, we have seen a number of policy measures that have been introduced and others that are still being contemplated. And one of such is a plan to invest massively in infrastructure. Now, the federal government has already spent some 750 billion naira on infrastructure in the past 5 months.
Indeed, Kingsley, that's what we are told. We are also aware that the federal government, of course, is planning to borrow about $30 billion to develop infrastructure projects in various sectors of the economy. And that, of course, is to fight off the recession. The National Assembly is still contemplating on that, of course, plan.
That's right. Now, but what is the borrowing option available to government, or what are the options available to government? Is borrowing the only viable option, and what else can be done in order to finance infrastructure development during a recession? And as we have indicated, where else can government look up to in order to show up its finances and then give a further fillip to the economy? In particular, what lessons are there to learn from other nations, particularly the developed ones that have improved their infrastructure, especially at moments when they found themselves in circumstances quite similar to what we are going through now, namely prolonged recession?
Of course, Kingsley, again, Brian Scott that we quoted earlier on, speaking specifically to the Canadian experience, we do know that Canada also, it's one of those countries, that have passed through recession and have also, developed their infrastructure. But reports show that some of those nations developed their infrastructure by means of privatization, capital market, tax reform, pension assets option, and sale of assets as well as bonds. So many other options that are available, to many other nations.
So against the background of the critical deficit of infrastructure in the country at both the local government and state levels, and in particular also at the national level, the critical question remains, again, considering our economic peculiarities, which infrastructure in particular should be focused on at this time in order to help get the country out of the current economic challenge and then serve also as a boon to the growth of the economy going forward. It's Good Morning Nigeria, and I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I welcome you to today's edition of the program.
All right, Kingsley, you talked about specific infrastructure to be focused on. I think all infrastructures are very critical to the development of the economy. Are you looking at power? Are you looking at road network? Are you looking at railway? All contribute to certain percentage, to the GDP, a country's GDP. So I think quite a number of them are very, very critical. And let me join Kingsley in welcoming you once again to the program. I am Claire Adelabo Abdul Razak. It's, of course, the second edition this week, reaching you from Africa's largest TV network, the Nigerian Television Authority. We also have on the program, as usual, the segments, of course, that make up the whole episode. We'll be looking at newspaper review, there'll be business, sports, arts and entertainment, of course, not forgetting foreign news. But right now, Ronke Kolawole is standing by to give us the early morning news. Ronke, good to see you once again.
Claire, welcome to the news. President Muhammadu Buhari is in Marrakesh, the Kingdom of Morocco, ahead of the conference of the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP22. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo reports that the president, accompanied by the governors of Plateau and Jigawa states, arrived in Minara Airport at about 8 o'clock Monday evening local time. He was received by a high-powered Moroccan government delegation led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Nasser Bourita. Also at the airport include Nigerian Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Environment, Water Resources, Agriculture, Power Works and Housing, and some members of the National Assembly, as well as the Charge d'Affaires of Nigeria in Morocco. While at the conference, the president is expected to highlight the unwavering commitment of Nigeria towards implementing the nationally determined contributions and policy actions aimed at tackling climate change through environmental sustainable efforts. The special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, said President Buhari will also use the occasion to rally international support for the cleanup of the Ogoni land in the Niger Delta and the resuscitation of the Lake Chad Basin.
President Muhammadu Buhari has shown deep and great commitment to issues of climate change because it affects us directly in Nigeria and it affects the whole world. Like it is said, there's no planet B. This is the only planet we have. So if we don't keep it, we don't tend it, we don't preserve it, then the planet will grow old and die. And when the planet dies, where do we live? You will recall that last year at COP21 in Paris, he made strong statements about the need to preserve the planet, and as it concerns us in Africa, particularly the Lake Chad. You will see that since that COP21 in Paris, issues that concern the Lake Chad have been on the front burners. It is expected that he will advance on that same issue. And then between COP21 and now, you also will recall that the Ogoni cleanup has been flagged off in Nigeria. I'm sure he's going to also tell the world about that cleanup and also solicit the hand of fellowship of the world in doing that cleanup.
Mr. Adesina said the president will also attend the COP22 Africa Day commemoration with the theme, Moving from Commitment to Action with Intended Nationally Determined Contribution and African Renewable Energy Initiative. Back in Nigeria, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says there are indications that the party may soon be over in the petroleum sector with increasing development in renewable energy. The Vice President was speaking at the launch of 3 books on the petroleum sector authored by the Minister of State for Petroleum, Emmanuel Ibe Kachiku.
Kachiku clearly took full advantage of the rare convergence of scholarship, contemporary experience, and policy wisdom to deliver what are probably today the most significant contributions to our understanding of major issues and nuances of the Nigerian petroleum industry.
In other news, Senate President Bukola Saraki has inaugurated vocational training and empowerment programs as part of his contributions to alleviate youth unemployment. 40,000 youths from Kwara and other neighboring states are to benefit from the scheme.
We also look at laws that we can do that will help and create opportunities for a lot of these youth who, after they get their certificate and they start to work, they must look for who is going to buy whatever they produce or they make.
Normalcy has been restored to Kwana, Dawaki, and Tamburana villages in Dawakin Kudu Council area of Kano State after a clash between Shiite members and the police. The State Commissioner of Police, Rabi Yusuf, disclosed this while briefing the media.
Of course, we used tear gas on them. In the process of using tear gas, that was how they now attacked one of our personnel who sustained fatal injury, and before he could be taken to hospital, he died. And we had no option that to use minimum force on them.
And still on security, Nigeria's defense attaches and advisors have been charged to develop a new outlook as the realities of the 21st century require them to play a wider overt and covert roles in ensuring national security. Minister of Defense Mansour Dan Ali said this at the 2016 Defense Attaches and Advisors Annual Conference held in Abuja. And now, talking about health matters, World Diabetes Day is aimed at increasing awareness on the effects of the disease and the complications in order to scale up prevention and strengthen care. The International Diabetes Federation estimates that 450 million adults currently have diabetes, and by 2040, the figure will rise to 642 million.
Builds up. Whatever the individual eats builds up in the blood is not getting to the cells, to get utilized for energy and nutrition. So it keeps building up. And when blood sugar remains high like that, it leads to all manner of complications. Diabetes is the leading cause of blindness, the leading cause of kidney failure, the leading cause of cardiovascular diseases like stroke, like heart attack, and, lower limb amputation.
And away from health, the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, says the film industry is one of the sectors the government is banking on to create jobs and contribute largely to the nation's economy. Lai Mohammed said this at the opening of 2016 Film Festival in Lagos.
I've seen 20th century folks, executives here today. I've seen the biggest, shakers and movers of the industry here today. I think it speaks volumes. What the need for us to do is to provide the enabling environment for them.
The federal government has warned that Nigeria, currently Africa's largest producer of cereals and grains, risks famine from early next year, following a huge demand in the global market that is targeted the country's surplus production. Presidential spokesman Garba Shehu gave the grain forecast in a radio interview in Kano. He said the huge demand for Nigeria grains in the global market is creating an excellent environment for the mindless export across the borders, and unless this is curtailed, Nigeria's market will be bereft of food by January next year. Former Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Ibrahim Dasuki, is dead. Aged 93, Alhaji Ibrahim Dasuki died yesterday in Abuja. He was the 18th Sultan of Sokoto and deposed in 1996 during the military government of General Sani Abacha. Former Sultan Ibrahim Dasuki will be buried today in Sokoto according to Islamic rites. That is the latest development from our news desk. We thank you for watching. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Claire after this time out.
If you hear a bomb explode or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Hello, dear. You've got the first signs of a sore throat.
Yes, and I'm afraid it could be signs of a sore throat.
Don't you worry. Just act immediately, but not with non-medicated throat sweet. Take an expert product. Take Strepsils. Look at what it does to sore throat germs compared to a throat sweet. Strepsils not only stops the germs from multiplying, it even kills them.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, sore throat. Stop a sore throat early. Take Strepsils.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Gariki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntap2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited. The much needed help at your doorstep.
All right, you're welcome back, but if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, the latest figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics indicate that inflation rate was at 18.3% for the month of October 2016. We'll now join our correspondent Joy Uzwa for this story and others.
Experts say Nigeria's inflation rate could reach 19% by the end of the year, as the economy continues to struggle to overcome hurdles. Latest figures from the National Bureau of Statistics show that Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, increased by 18.3% year-on-year in October 2016, 0.48% higher from the rate recorded in September. Increases were recorded across almost all major divisions, which contribute to the headline index. The Food and Agriculture Organization says it is committed to enhancing food security in Nigeria through improved and safe farming system. Consequently, the FAO brought together interest groups to dialogue on land governance and food security to address incessant clashes between farmers and herdsmen.
So this is very important for FAO because by resolving the conflicts, we can produce more, which can ensure also food security.
We are in the process of developing some of the grazing reserve, ensuring that we have pasture in this grazing reserve, and working with the state and the farmers themselves to ensure that this conflict is brought to a minimal level, if not.
Already, land reclamation has begun in the far north to curtail desert encroachment on pasture land with the planting of jatropha, an economic tree.
A global plant used in controlling the environment, recovery of wasteland.
The workshop is an implementation of voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure on land, fisheries and forests, VGGT, in the context of national food security and validation of studies on pastoralism in Nigeria. Next is a graphic summary of recent trading figures on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And that's it on Business News. I am Joy Uzo.
Joy Uzo there on Business News. Joy, many thanks. Up next will be newspaper review.
Bayo Atoyobi, the Good Morning Nigeria newspaper reviewer, is right here with us, as always, for today's session. Bayo, it's our pleasure to welcome you.
Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Claire. Nice to see you again. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. All right, let's begin our review this morning. We have a potpourri of stories on the front pages of the papers. One of the stories most common to them is the passing of the former Sultan. Ex-Sultan Dasuki dies at 92. That's according to the Nation newspaper. Ex-Sultan Dasuki dies at 92 is the lead story for the Daily Trust. Says a faint Sultan Dasuki dies at 92, with a rider to be buried today in Sokoto. You have the photograph of the late Sultan there. And it's also there on the front page of Vanguard newspaper. Just below the photographs there you have Dasuki, ex-Sultan of Sokoto, dies at 93. Details of the story can be found on page 45. Well, let me quickly take other headlines from the front page of the Nation newspaper. The lead story for the Nation newspaper says, Buhari bows to governors on board's appointments. And Oshibajo meets with Saraki, Dogara, and others. That's the rider to that story. Now, below that, you have a photograph of the bloody scenes yesterday following the clash between the police and Shiite members somewhere on the outskirts of Kano. 9 died in Shiite police clash in Kano. Details of the story can be found on page 2. And also there on the front page, we have a story, inflation hits 18.3%. And also above the nameplate of the Nation newspaper, we have the following. ASU begins 1-week warning strike tomorrow. That's on page 6 in greater detail. Cameroon will be tougher than Algeria, says coach and presidency. Nigeria may face famine in January. And Boko Haram, I can't fight again. Injured soldier laments. And how $702,000 was paid into Bade's account. That's in greater detail on page 41. And at the foot of the front page, there's a headline there that says 2016 set to become warmest ever. That's on page 8.
Okay, let's quickly take a look at the front page of this day. And it leads with the story, Oshibajo meets with APC governors, NA leadership on FG appointments. It comes with the rider, list of nominees to boards of parastatols, non-career ambassadors to be reviewed. That's the lead story. Down below that story, you have domestic debt, federal government to issue promissory notes to contractors in 2017. And also just below that story, you have police sergeant, 8 Shiites killed in Kano clash. You can see the details of that story on page 9. And of course, the picture story right there on the screen is that of the former Sultan Dasuki, who of course we were told died yesterday in Kaduna at the age of 93. There are more details of his death on page 9. Now let me take you quickly above the nameplate. You have Dangote calls for improved funding to fight malaria. And it has the Rider Dyer Foundation wins African Philanthropy Award. That's the outlook of this day newspaper on the front page. Let's quickly get Bayo's reactions to some of these stories.
Yes, the Sultanate in Sokoto has been receiving condolences from all over the Federation following the death of the 18th Sultan, former Sultan Ibrahim Dasuki. Reports say that he was indisposed for a while, and he gave up the ghost at the age of 93. He is to be buried today, 2 p.m. in Sokoto. He was deposed in 1996 during the regime of General Sani Abacha. Before his deposition, he was the Barad in Sokoto, and he hails of the Buhari lineage of the Usman Danfodio. He succeeded Sultan Abubakar III, and he also was succeeded by Machido, who also died in the plane crash in Abuja. The current Sultan succeeded the Sultan Machido Mohammed. Talking about Shiite, They were embarking on what they describe as their annual Arabian walk between Kano and Kaduna. So at a place called Konan Dawaki, there was a clash between them and the police. The police say they had blocked the highway, stopping motorists from moving, and they were armed with bows and arrows, cutlasses, and other dangerous weapons. In the process, one policeman was killed, and police say they had to apply minimum force, and in the process, I think one policeman and 8 Shiite members are said to have died. 4 policemen are also injured, and 10 other Shiite men have been injured. But however, the Commissioner of Police says calm has been restored to the area in between the Kano and Zaria Highway where it happened. Talking about consultation, the Guardian has indicated that there's been a meeting between the Senate President, the Speaker, and 5 governors along with the Vice President. The areas that were considered, according to the Senate President, is following measures for better working relations between all arms of government. But there are indications, and the papers are speculating that it is not far-fetched from the $29.9 million loan required for external borrowing, as well as the list of nominees for ambassadorial appointments, as well as a delay in having board appointment. It will be recalled that as far back as November last year, there were pressures from state governors, even when ministers were to be appointed, and the president then was quietly rebuffed by saying that he doesn't interfere in the appointment of commissioners, therefore they should leave him with the appointment of the minister. But the president, as reported in the paper now, the president has gladly consented to their involvement in the appointments regarding ambassadorial and board's appointment. There is also the story Kingsley read about inflation rate. From the National Bureau of Statistics, October figure shows that inflation rate is now 18.3, and it is said that it's 48% higher than what it was September last year. The area of concern, according to report, are in the indexes for food, as well as the other areas include housing, water, electricity, and domestic items. That is the inflation report.
That's right. Well, let's take other headlines now. Return to Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust, below its name flag, it says, Presidency, foreign grains demand threatens food security. That's on page 11 in greater detail. And then you also have there on the front page, federal government charges Justice Ademola and wife over fraud. That's on page 3 in greater detail. And then at the foot of the front page, you have a window of headlines there. $30 billion loan and MTF. Oshibajo meets Saraki, Dogara, and governors. That's on page 5. And the story of the ASU strike starting off tomorrow, it's also there on the front page as a headline, but in greater detail on page 9. And Kachiku wants oil blocks allocated to states. That's on page 13 in greater detail. Claire.
All right, Kingsley. The Punch is next, and it leads with the story. Presidency raises the alarm over imminent farming. You have the details of that story on page 8, but it comes with 2 riders. The first one says 500 trucks laden with grains leave Nigeria weekly, and plates with religious traditional rulers to appeal to exporters and federal government to purchase surplus grains for storage. And the picture story there on the front page of the Punch, 8 Shiites, 1 policeman died in Kano clash, and you see, of course, the scene of that clash yesterday, the details of that on page 41. Trending at the bottom, vandals steal cables, plunge Kubwa Road into darkness, page 41. ASU begins nationwide strike on Wednesday, that's on page 35. And Oshibajo, Saraki, Dogara, governors meet over $30 billion loan. You can find details of that on page 15. Now a little above the masthead. Obasanjo wanted life presidency, not third term, Atiku insists. It's on page 8. And Sharia police raid Jigawa beer parlors, arrest 34. And ex-CDS Badi forfeits $1 million cash to federal government. You can find that on page 15. Now, Boko Haram displaces 370,389 households in Northeast. That's on page 41. Bio.
Yes, the alarm raised about famine is a matter of urgent concern. There is an irony in it. We have bumper harvest now, grains are surplus, and businessmen are taking smart advantage of it by exporting 500 trucks a week. If that is not stemmed very quickly, then we are in crisis. And this was revealed by the Special Assistant to the President, Garba Shehu, on the radio program in Kano. In the process, traditional rulers and religious leaders have been called to appeal to these businessmen about the dangers involved. On this side, they've appealed to the Minister of Agriculture to put in place to stimulate the strategic grain reserve. We are supposed to have grain silos across the country that serves as the location for grains, particularly in the area where there are surplus. And I think they ought to have a program to help farmers so that when there is surplus production, so that the price doesn't fall to the extent that continue to farm will be a burden for them. So that helps to sustain the farmers and also provide grains. This time around, unless we kickstart the Strategic Grain Reserve Initiative through the grain silos, we could be in crisis, according to the report by January.
The truth of the matter is that this story, that's the story being echoed by Garba Shehu, was actually the lead story for Daily Trust some weeks ago. Yes, we had it we saw it on Daily Trust. We reviewed it on this program, and indeed when we also discussed the program related to agriculture, there were some of our guests who spoke on the need for government to proceed along the lines that you've just talked about, to be sure that indeed you don't have illegal exports of grains. We do not know why we are having this massive export of grains outside of the country. Is it that the grains are being stored outside and then to be brought back when there's some artificial farming,
scarcity,
where you create some artificial scarcity? And what's happening to the silos that we have? There's a massive silo outside of Abuja city. You know that it's on the Abuja-Lokoja Expressway. You have 100,000 tons of silo capacity in Birni Kebbi, which is the capital of Kebbi State, and elsewhere in other parts of the country.
The other worry is, where are the Board of Custom and Excise if 500 trucks are leaving this country weekly with grains?
Weekly, yes. So, I don't know. Well, Bayo, let's take other headlines, similar, by the way, from the front page of Vanguard. Claire, you already read some of those headlines. Very quickly, above the nameplate of Vanguard, judicial corruption. Federal government slams 15-count charge against Justice Ademola and wife. That's on page 45. I stopped Obasanjo's third term bid. That's according to former Vice President Atiku. Details of that on page 8. And then you have the story. The lead story there is Zakzaki. That's the kicker. 20 killed as police and she has clash in Kano with riders. Police fire tear gas, live ammunition at our members. That's the claim by the Shiites. And Shiite members blocked expressway and attacked innocent citizens. That's according to the police. And then you also have on the front page, it's sad Nigeria has been run on old ideas. That's former Senator Iyabo Obasanjo. That's on page 43 in greater detail. And then you also have there, we spent 10 days counting 1.2 billion naira from Fayoshe's ally on that bullet. That's according to a witness in the trial. Details of that on page 45.
Well, quickly, just something about the budget. The Guardian has highlighted that although we have just about a month for the year to end, the current 2016 budget will have its last span terminate in March. And the paper is referring to the Appropriation Act, which stipulates that the budget runs for 12 calendar months from the day the President gave assent to it. However, the media advisor to the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Apadem James, has indicated that about 3.577 trillion of the 2016 budget have been executed so far. That is about 79% of the budget. Meanwhile, Governor Yahya Bello of Kogi State has returned to Lokoja. You recall there was this rumor about his whereabouts, and even some speculated he had health challenges. However, the media aide to the governor had clarified that it was rumor, and the governor was away for 14 days rest. He's now back, and according to a tweet by a special assistant to the governor, Benga Olorunpomi, he says the boss is back, locked, loaded, and ready to go.
All right. Bayo Atoyebi, the viewer, we'd like to thank you once again for doing a good job. And indeed, you do have quite a number of fans out there. So
really, do you?
We'll see you tomorrow.
We do it together. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow then.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Tuesday's edition is reaching you live from here in Abuja, Africa's largest TV network, the NTA. We'll be right back.
Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
People think it's the ever-changing weather during Harmattan that makes them sick. Actually, it's the germs. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs, including flu.
Does your antiseptic liquid kill the germs that cause flu, diarrhea, typhoid? Dettol does. Dettol provides 10 times more protection versus leading competition. So why take a risk with your loved ones?
Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make me go. What's it waiting for? So change begins from within. Look at you, oh get change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
All right, thank you for joining us once again. Let's start off our conversation, and just to remind you that you can join in the conversation, of course, by following us on our Twitter handle. Is again the address is at NTAGMN. Once again, Twitter handle at NTAGMN. Now let's begin. Nigeria is set to have about 5.9 trillion naira infrastructure deficit. Now that represents about 25% of the nation's GDP, and that has continued to hinder the growth and development of the country. Now, to reverse the trend, this administration has, of course, started several initiatives. One is to invest more funds in developing infrastructure in the country, and that's as a way of jump-starting the economy. Yeyemi Ajayi gives us a background report to kickstart our discussion.
Recession has continued to be a major problem that is biting hard on Nigerians and having a deep toll on the nation's economy. This has affected prices of commodities, with inflation rising, leaving the government and Nigerians working hard to find a way out. However, analysts have identified infrastructural development in the country as an important step to reviving the economy. This includes road network, schools, seaports, airports, railways, power, housing, hospitals, and water supply, among others. This is not lost on government, as the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Rajafashola, submitted that the immediate and long-term solution to the economic recession is to massively invest in infrastructure. President Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Frank Jacobs, is of the opinion that unemployment, wealth creation, and internally generated revenues would be tackled if government could reposition the industrial and manufacturing sector through viable policies. He said government should implement its resource-based industrialization to develop key mineral resources. It is also believed that the revival of the rail system in the country will reduce the heavy burden on the Nigerian roads. Experts also suggest that there should be adequate and quality support infrastructure that would encourage more domestic production in terms of volume of output and cost effectiveness. But to rebuild and resuscitate this infrastructure, they pointed out, require huge fund, which the country is sourcing for at the moment. It is estimated that $25 billion is needed yearly to close the recession gap. But what particular infrastructures are needed for immediate revival? and who should take the lead in the provision of this infrastructure? Are they to be solely provided by government? These are some of the questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be giving more insights.
All right, Oyemi Ajayi, we'd like to thank you very much there for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the studios to discuss this subject matter. At this time, we'd like to welcome first Mr. Roland Ataguba. He's CEO of Bethlehem Rail Infrastructure, which is based in London. Mr. Ataguba, it's our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
All right, and then we also have with us here in the Abuja studios the Honorable Osai, Nicholas Osai. He's chair of the House of Reps Committee on Ethics and Privileges, but also belongs to other committees on public accounts as well as finance. Honorable Osai, it's our pleasure that you are here with us today.
Thank you.
Okay. And Claire?
Right, of course, it's my honor to introduce our next guest, and it's Dr. Chris Akomas, former Deputy Governor of Abia State. So I'd like to thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, and good morning.
And also from our Lagos Network Center, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo is not a new face. He's a financial analyst, if I may add, GMN's consultant. We'd like to thank you for joining us from Lagos, Mr. Tilewa.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right.
All right. Let's begin this conversation by latching onto the handle of the bill presented by Honorable Osai, Nicholas Osai. There's a road fund bill now before the National Assembly, before the House. It may be useful to have a background as to all of this, because there were moves in the past under the previous administration to have a road, the Road Development Authority, road fund, and so on and so forth. Nothing seemed to have gelled at the time. So what is the new initiative?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think these bills were consolidated some months ago. There were two bills. One is Federal Road Fund, and the other my National Road Fund. And the objective is very simple. Generate more revenues through the collection of certain charges, and be able to look at this revenue and administer this revenue. At the same time, use this revenue to fix the deficit aspect of our roads. And I have also looked at other countries like United States of America. United States of America didn't have a better road until 1956. When National Road Fund was enacted, and then United States of America. Equally also in China. You find out that since 1998 up to until 2014, when national road funds were also enacted in the People's Republic of China. It was after then you started seeing a lot of good roads being fixed in China and the same time in the United States of America. We all traveled abroad and see the way the roads in America are. It is through road fund that most of these infrastructures were fixed. And a research has been conducted. I laid my hand on that research. That was 5 years ago. Then when I was also in the House of Representatives, 7th Assembly. And I discovered that Nigeria needed, as of that time, about 800 billion to fix our federal roads. And up to now, I think it has tripled, up to 2.4 trillion that is needed to fix Nigerian roads. To such extent, government cannot do it alone. There are some other areas we could generate funds and put experts in such a board as is applicable in 2025. In the 1925, there was a road board that was formed then during our colonial time. And that road board was charged in fixing our roads, and also maintaining those roads. But since we left that kind of, pattern of administering our road has become a debt trap, up to the extent that Nigeria is estimated through research that Nigerians spend over 500 billion in fixing their cars because of the bad nature of the roads.
So 500 billion naira, dollars or euro? 500
billion naira as of that time 5 years ago. My research is coming from base that was conducted 5 years ago. You could imagine, you could triple that now because of the value of our currency now. So it's tripled. To such extent, now our roads have become debt trapped. The means of doing business has gone down. High charges because of bad roads. All these are issues that we have to address. It is in that light that I and my colleagues feel, let us bring something to life that can ease, the ways of doing business in our country. And that's why we introduced this bill. I'm happily, so glad that even the Minister of Works is happy with the bill. The government, the Society of Engineers are also happy with the bill. The National Road Transport Association is interested in the bill. The quantity surveyors are also interested in the bill. But everyone who came to the public hearing are interested in the bill. But what was required in the bill is that they were introducing one or two issues, to better the bill. That is the collaborative effort, so that a high public value can be achieved.
Honorable Osai, thank you. We also, like you rightly said, the Honorable Minister, in responding to the bill or reacting to the bill, also cautioned, given the fact that some of the roads that you're talking about are within the purview of the state and local governments, of course, which administer them through the taxes that they collect. Does this bill take cognizance of that?
Yeah, of course. Of course, this will take cognizance of that. But if you're using 5% of user charges in petroleum and diesel, that affects the state. It equally affects the local government.
All right, Honorable Sir, we'll deal with some of the details of what you just raised, because certainly some of these aspects aren't new. We have also witnessed in this country the erection of toll gates and their eventual dismantling, and how proceeds from those toll gates appeared not to have been utilized for the maintenance of the roads. It just turned out to be some patronage gravy. But let's go to our Lagos Network Center. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo was introduced earlier. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, we're taking a much broader look now on developing infrastructure against the background of our economic recession. The government has a raft of plans, including now some $30 billion to be borrowed. But let's begin from the philosophical framework. From your perspective, what ordinarily should guide the funding of infrastructure at a critical time like this when government purse is lean?
Thank you very much. I think you've hit on a very important point, because the funding is very limited. And if you're going to deploy $30 billion, you really have to think very carefully about the projects that you select and the impact of that project within the economy to realize the desired effects. Let us take a look at Lagos, for instance, where about 70% of the Nigerian economy resides, or at least within this region. If you take a look at the main artery that leads out of Lagos, which is the roads from the ports of Lagos, where there is intense importation activity, at least the largest port in Nigeria, and moving goods from that port out of the ports in Apapa all the way through to the Apapa-Oshodi Expressway onto the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Without a doubt, this is the nerve center of economic activity, and that infrastructure or that road network has been in a bad state for the last 10 years. Clearly, this is a priority project. So what is most important is that you need to prioritize the projects you want to implement, and then you really need to ask yourself two questions, especially when government does not have any money. Which one of these infrastructure projects are bankable, and which ones are not? And from my own understanding, the Ministry of Budget and Planning has already identified about 18 to 25 projects which worth about 10 trillion naira, which they consider to be bankable. Now, if you have projects that are bankable, what that means is that if you put in a proper structure that is transparent, that is credible, you will attract foreign and, of course, local investments to be able to fund that infrastructure on your behalf. So what government needs to do is to be able to put in place a proper mechanism to attract private capital to fund bankable infrastructure projects. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. So the question that I have is, why do you want to borrow $30 billion to spend on a project that would otherwise could have been funded by the private sector. But government has over the years has not been able to put together a credible platform for concessioning all these projects to attract the right private capital. I'll put up an example, for instance, the Mambila Dam that has been proposed for part of this $30 billion. Why do you want to spend $5 billion on a dam when the studies that have been done before shows that this project can be financed by private capital? So why don't you spend a little bit of money to be able to make sure that all the studies have been done, all the preparatory work has been put in place, put all the permits in place, and invite private capital to invest in the project? So we have more priorities with the internal road network of this country and how to create a sustainable way to be able to manage those roads. And if you concession most of these roads, you toll them to private operators, then they have the responsibility of taking care of them. Once government does that, then the 30 billion that you want to borrow might not even be, you might not need to borrow 30 billion. Maybe you need to borrow 15 billion or 10 billion to now focus on what you would call the social infrastructure that might be in healthcare and education that will impact the lives of Nigerians and help them significantly. So I think for me that is where we have a problem. We are not yet prioritizing, and we are not allowing private capital to pick up the slack.
All right, Mr. Tilewa, just still to remain with you. Like you, there are those, of course, who have expressed, some reservations about borrowing to finance our infrastructure, and those people have, given out some areas to look at, has given government some areas to look at. For instance, they point out what they call idle, domiciliary accounts in our commercial banks. They've also talked about remittances from Nigerians in diaspora, and they've also said, look, why don't we also look at the pension fund? What, in your opinion, should or might suffice for a country like Nigeria in recession?
Like I said, it's a process. If you put a transparent process in place to do your concession, funds will flow. Like you said, remittances into Nigeria is about $25 billion a year from the diaspora. There's been a crisis of confidence with people's domiciliary accounts because the central bank at a point in time was threatening to convert those dollars into Naira or not letting people access their DOM accounts. That has created a crisis of confidence. There are all kinds of foreign portfolio investors, and of course, like you've talked about, the pension funds, but you have to create the right class of assets. You have to put the right structures in place for these funds to flow into these projects. If you do not do that, then it's difficult for these funds to find these sort of projects to invest in, because these people coming to invest in these projects are taking a very long-term view. Infrastructure investors are not in the business of portfolio investors for short-term gains. They're in this business for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. And so they need to be sure that the government is serious about what they're doing. And, my own opinion is that a lot of these projects that the government wants to do is bankable. And they do not need to borrow $30 billion to spend on that, especially the Mambila Dam. All the other projects that they've specified are very vague. We do not know the details of those projects. And I can assure you that if you do your sums right, the net borrowing of government for this round of infrastructure financing should not exceed $10 billion.
All right, Tilewa Adebajo, thank you very much. We'll return to you at our Lagos Network Center. You touched on some very important points, of course, along with Honorable Osai here, who's illustrating with the road fund. But let's get the views of Mr. Roland Ataguba. We earlier introduced him. He's CEO of Bethlehem Rail Infrastructure based in the UK. You listen to what our guest just said from the Lagos Network Center. Now, what's your take on this? If you deal with rail infrastructure, and the federal government, among its measures amongst the measures it hopes to take will be to reach out and get almost $30 billion US to fund infrastructure, what will be attractive to you as an infrastructure developer, particularly in the rail sector?
Thank you very much. And it was very interesting to listen to the earlier contributors, Nicholas Osai, Honorable Osai, I beg your pardon, in explaining the rationale behind the Roads Fund bill. A bill that I acknowledge has been in the making for many, many years. And it is a development that's most welcome, and one that needs to be seen through prosecution. But that aside is the fact that the Roads Fund alone will not fund infrastructure. It deals with roads. And of course, we have or take a holistic view of the infrastructure spectrum. It covers quite a lot of disciplines or industries. Roads are very significant in transport because 90% of most goods and passengers in Nigeria move on the roads, which is in itself a bad thing. Because there are other means of transportation, railways, maritime, i.e. inland waterways, means by which we can move people and goods. However, the roads have come to dominate, largely because we have abandoned or ignored those other modes of carriage. Notwithstanding, there are other areas of infrastructure that also need to be funded. But as the gentleman from Lagos, I think Mr. Adebanjo, has just said, there are quite a number of bankable projects that can be funded by the private sector. And I think that the Roads Fund or other similar funds need to focus on financing those projects that government is obliged to do, but is not bankable, i.e. is unattractive for the private sector. Now we're also needing to integrate infrastructure so that you've got aviation, talking about transportation, so you can have aviation, you can have roads, you can have railways and maritime all working together, meaning that the roads move goods to the railways, which move them to the next delivery spot, and they work synergetically. Right now, that is not happening. And there is therefore a need, whilst we're focusing on raising capital or funds for roads, that we are also providing commensurate support for the other infrastructure modes so that they can effectively compete amongst themselves. One of the complaints of the railway sector over the years has, of course, been the if you like, unbalanced support that the various sectors receive from government.
Sorry, Mr. Roland Atagoba, I'd like you to return, you talk generally now about your concern about the road sector. There's already some existing framework dealing with intermodality of transportation across the country. My question, following from what both Honorable Sai and Tilewa Adebayo said, has to do with, you are in the rail infrastructure sector. What would you find most attractive? Will it be concessioning, or you would like to develop a rail system with funds borrowed by the government, in which case you have little or no risk, you just construct and then it runs itself?
Well, as far as railways is concerned, there are two sides. There is the cost of the infrastructure, which is a sunk cost because you don't recover that. And then there are the operational and maintenance costs. That and the model that we advocate is one in which the government provides the infrastructure and the private sector provide the funding of the operations and maintenance. That is that model. But importantly, it's about also appreciating that these modes compete with each other. I'll give you an example. The Kaduna-Abuja railway has just been, or has recently been opened. It competes head-to-head for passengers with the roads. Now, if the incentives that are available to the operators aren't balanced, then you won't have effective competition. And what is happening right now is that if government builds the roads and maintains the roads, why don't you expect a railway operator to maintain at his own expense? So these are some of the imbalances I talked about earlier. The other is, in fact, enforcement of our laws. We've got axle load limits on roads, where you see trailers, you see lorries, you see trucks all being overloaded. No one stops them, no one prevents them. Yet the railway sector is obliged to carry limited weights. So these are the kind of imbalances that do not promote healthy competition between the modes. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Right.
We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation.
Indeed, Kingsley, we'll get back to Mr. Taguba, but let's return to Dr. Akamas, former Deputy Governor of Abia State now. In the past, we've had several, programs dedicated to funding infrastructure, particularly roads. I'm sure you're aware that sometime, previous governments removed subsidy on petroleum products, and dedicated them to roads rehabilitation and construction. Now, with that in mind, what's your opinion about the national, road, fund bill and infrastructure generally?
Thank you very much. It is a welcome development that Honorable Sir and his colleagues, and indeed others, have come up with this bill. And hoping that it will be perfected. I see what they're presenting like going back to the olden days. Growing up, I wake up in the morning and you see PWD men who resides very close to us along various corridors of the country. And they focus on the maintenance of the roads. If there's a pothole or there's a part failure of a road, you don't have to wait for Abuja or something. Something happens. So that's good. But be that as it may, when I think Mr. Taylor from Lagos was speaking, he talked about various issues, and my mind went to how did we start the funding of the power sector to come to focus? It's not yet Uhuru, but there is a focus now on how best. And that was what gave us the opportunity, the impetus to be able to, sell some of these projects to the private sector, hoping to perfect it. We also have all sorts of funds dedicated to various areas. But the question is, how have we managed these funds? If we are talking of infrastructure development in a recession, I believe we should focus on developing or funding to needs, not want. I listened to the Honorable Minister of Works, and he was talking about the various corridors and the efforts to, have the most important network of roads in the loop of what they are doing. You can't have all the money for everything at the same time. But I am also aware that there are people from outside this country and within who are interested in investing in infrastructure. But our problem has been how well the investment will be protected, how well the system can, handle this, and over time, because you're not talking of, someone mentioned 5-10 years. There are people looking at 20-25 years. And when we talk of infrastructure, we're just talking about roads, we are talking about railways. Good, we have made some progress in railways. And look at how long it has come to this point where we are now talking of having the coaches built in Nigeria, having the training institute so that we can develop manpower to support it. What other areas, talking about the technology inwards, like what Mr.
of taking care of infrastructure. Look at our housing deficit issues that we are talking about. We have several houses empty because people have developed to want, to desire, not to need. Because you develop and build infrastructure towards what your people can afford and what is. Yes, there will be room and plan for expansion. Again, when you do this, and this is the major problem, our project management has been an issue. I am happy that these days you don't find an engineers that are not registered with CORE, talking of Council of Registered Engineers of Nigeria, coming to supervise projects. Most of these projects were hitherto supervised by unqualified or not very well experienced people or consultants or whatever they may call them. And so we had that effect. After building this, after talking of getting funds to build this, what are the plans to manage them? We are talking of the administration of roads. What in that bill can assure us of the sustenance of these projects, the infrastructure that we develop? You have 3 tiers of government, whichever way you look at it. And the roads cut across places. There is need to involve the state, the local government in not only the building, but the management of roads, not just to construct roads and abandon it. Every December, people will come out. There are 2 strong forces on earth. That is water and fire. December, people will come out under the disguise of celebrating the end of the year. They put bonfires on asphalted roads. 2 months later, that area will collapse. So we must find a way, a holistic approach to all this. And if we were able to get both the federal, local government, and states to fund together and come together and develop a format through which the power sector is being driven, it's not yet what we expect, but we'll get there. We can also look at a way to develop this, because these federal roads pass through states. They belong to states. They also belong to local governments. And when these roads collapses, the people that suffer most are those within that area. And when I hear that the federal government is going to give a certain amount of money, is it 20 billion to each state for, a kind of refund for what they've done on the federal roads. And I ask myself, what is the yardstick? How did we arrive at this? How come you are giving something that is equal? Does it mean that they all did the same thing, same quality, same value, same thing all over? So in having this bill, it's an opportunity for us to think much broadly and much more wide. And infrastructure is not limited to roads. And in our country, the importance of water transport cannot be overemphasized. The importance of rail transport cannot be overemphasized. But again, what are we taking along? So I think getting funds is good, but it shouldn't be what we used to do. Let's just do it, spend the money, and leave the bill for all of us to pay, when we have other ways and means of funding these projects and managing it better.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Chris Akobans. Again, we'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. But just to deal with the aspects relating to the road fund, which was sponsored by Honorable Nicholas Osai. But I would like us, gentlemen, to, again, deal with the broader issues of financing against the backdrop of the federal government seeking some $29.9 billion US, almost $30 billion. And my question is going to Tilewa Adebajo at our network studios in Lagos. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, let's take a look at this. Assuming the government were able to draw down on the $30 billion right now and say, okay, deploy for infrastructure. In your opinion, what potential value can we retain in the economy? I'm asking this question, again, on the basis of what we know. I would like you to see over-invoicing of imported components or requirements. I would like you to see, capital flight. I would like you to also see repatriated earnings, by the companies that have made profits participating in the execution of these infrastructural projects. And if so, what are the hazards that we should be wary of?
Thank you very much. First of all, the reason I am in favor of the IMF loans is that if you take an IMF facility or a World Bank facility, it eliminates a lot of the issues that you have talked about. And the reason why I propose an IMF loan is that Egypt just took 12 billion IMF loan, and they had to change their foreign exchange rates, and they had to deregulate their petroleum sector. We have done that already. We have a floating exchange rate system, a flexible exchange rate system, and we've already removed the subsidies, and I don't see any more areas or any more obvious areas of rent seeking in the economy. So if you go the IMF and the World Bank route, I think these are solid organizations who go through a series of processes to ensure that the impact assessment to the economy is properly met. So I don't have a problem with those loans, and I think I encourage more of the IMF and the World Bank loans. The loans that I have a problem with are loans from the Chinese, and the experience we have with the Chinese in this country today. We can see evidence. I think the most successful project they've done is the Kaduna Abuja rail line, but we still have to get that line operational and functional. And the loans that we've got for the airports, we haven't really seen the impact except the new airport coming up in the new terminal in Abuja and the expansion that was supposed to happen in Lagos. We haven't really seen much of that, and that was supposed to be $500 million. So my concern, the issues you've raised will depend on where you get those facilities. But having said that, we also have to be very careful about these things, because my concern is also with the rail structure. The rail concessioning that is supposed to be taking place, we keep talking about General Electric is coming to take over the rail concessioning. So why do you want to spend money when GE is coming there? And also, General Electric is a company that makes locomotives. I don't know if they have the capacity to run a rail system. But as the gentleman from the rail concessioning company from the UK has said, the government has already invested in upgrading this rail system. They've made that investment. The only issue now is for somebody to run that structure. So I think it's very important where we get this money, who we get it from, to be able to make sure that what we're supposed to do with this money, we get it on the long run. But my argument still remains the same. If the private sector can fund this, there shouldn't be a problem. We all know that a Nigerian was the one that bought Gatwick Airport with his massive infrastructure fund. We have companies here like the African Finance Corporation with very competent professionals who can put out an infrastructure funding program for the government, for bankable projects. So why don't we consider this first before we have to go and borrow? But if we do have to borrow, like I've said, I think these are the institutions that we need to go with.
Still staying with you, while you opt for IMF borrowing, there are those who feel that, look, IMF is too distant from us and may not understand, the peculiarities of our challenges. Why don't we look inwards to regional, development finance institutions like, African Development Bank, for instance? What do you think of that? You think they are not, liquid enough to provide the kind of loan that we require to address our infrastructural deficit?
Development Bank is only giving us $1 billion, so they don't have the capacity. You have to go everywhere. You have to look at all the other options. And I disagree. The IMF and the World Bank, they're not distant to us at all. Raising money, we're part of the global financial markets. We sell our oil on the international markets. The Nigerian economy is open to portfolio investors who invest at the height close to $30 to $40 billion a year into our economy. We have a robust oil and gas industry that has significant foreign direct investments. So the IMF and the World Bank, they're not far away from us at all. They understand this country, they understand the issues in this country, and there's nothing different from it. The IMF is just an historical issue that we need to get over. That was 30 years ago, the whole IMF debate. The world has moved beyond that. Nigeria has moved beyond that. And we don't have any more subsidies in the system that they'll tell us to take out. So if you go for this sort of loans, these are disciplined organizations who will put our loan requests through a very rigorous process. And if they feel that that loan or what we want to use that money for cannot make the impact, they will decline it. And they will ask us to go and find another project that makes sense. So, and that is why I like the discipline of these organizations. And that is really what we need to prevent the earlier questions you put forward to us. So these are viable projects, and the gentleman from the railway company in the UK, if he's going to participate in a World Bank project, a World Bank funded project concessioning, or an IMF concessioning project, you will attract the best of the best from the world if the World Bank and IMF are in charge of this process, because people feel that there's a certain degree of transparency, accountability, and all the funds from all over the world will come into play. And I think it's also important that the bill that is being passed on the road front is also very important, because people understand that once you can get some money, at least once some of this infrastructure is in place, the road fund can go towards maintenance to augment the tolls that will also be collected on these loans. There are many companies in the world who, if you give them the right incentives, they will come and build the roads from Lagos to Kano, or from Kano to Enugu, or Kano to Port Harcourt. Give them the right concessions, they'll bring in the money, they'll build the roads, they'll toll them, and they're ready to wait 20 years to make their money back. That is what we should tap into, so that the less of the money we need, we can also invest in social infrastructure such as healthcare and education that we do not consider as bankable projects. But so if government is spending money on healthcare and education, the investment is critical to help our GDP and raise the standards of living of our people. That is really what government should focus on, instead of competing with the private sector on bankable projects.
Well, Mr. Adebayo, we know you're pressed for time. I just wanted you to respond to this last perspective put forward by Mr. Roland Ataguba before we let you go. But you've spoken around it in general. Mr. Ataguba says that when you're getting the facility, you worry about what you want to do with the facility. Is it to lay down the infrastructure? Is it to upgrade the infrastructure? Or is it to maintain the infrastructure? From your perspective, where would you think would be the best fit for whatever resources government is looking for at this time, in particular the $30 billion loans? Will it be in infrastructure directly, in maintenance, or in operations?
Government should focus on funding on the development of the infrastructure, and they should allow the private sector to worry about the operations and maintenance and sustainability, which is where this the Road Act that is being, or the Road Fund Act that is being proposed, comes into place. If government has invested in the infrastructure, let somebody else, let the private sector worry about maintaining it and sustaining it, which is really where we had the problem over the years.
All right, Mr. Tilewa Adebayo, a financial analyst, pleasure always having you on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you again for your insights in our conversation this morning.
Thank you, and Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, we'll take a short break now. When we return, there are reactions already. As my colleague Claire said, you can take advantage of our Twitter handle at NTAGMA. We'll take some of those tweets when we return from this short break, as well as comments from the other guests with us in the Abuja studios.
What's your name, my dear?
Her name is Jabel.
Chantel.
I love taking my selfies.
I have 2 selfies too. I'll give you one and I'll make use of one.
Are you serious?
So why don't you hop into my car and go to my hotel room and
I wasn't thinking straight.
He was thinking zigzag. Selfie stick. This week's episode of Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Yami Fashlanso, and special guest appearance by Yvonne Nelson.
If you say me in a bushman, you na poorest man. Me, but you na desert man. You are a young woman.
Professor John Bull, this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network International and Star Times.
I don't think I'm looking fine here. No, you're fine. Don't worry. See my eyes here. No, but you're not that fine. No, eh?
Over and out. Welcome to the new speed of life.
Your feet are stomping, and the jam is pumping. The crowd is jumping. Up and down and push up on. Listen across the country like sound. Jump up and dance, make them understand to me. That you could only be contraband. Send me hype on excited. We're gonna rock your heart like it.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
People think it's the ever-changing weather during Hamatan that makes them sick. Actually, it's the germs. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs, including flu.
Does your antiseptic liquid kill the germs that cause flu, diarrhea, typhoid? Dettol does. Dettol provides 10 times more protection versus leading competition. So why take a risk with your loved ones?
All right, welcome back to the program. It's Good Morning Nigeria here on NTA, reaching you from Abuja. And our conversation is on financing infrastructure. We've received quite a number of tweets, and quickly, Kingsley and I will take some of them before we continue with the questions for our guests. Abdul Hamid Shuaibu tweets, I think PMB, that's President Muhammadu Buhari, should be supported to borrow and fill the infrastructural gap of those recovered looted funds be used.
And we have this from Sunday Makala Makoje. It says, financing infrastructure at a time like this is a misplacement of priority and insensitivity on the part of our policymakers.
But Mike Anyako tweets, the most viable option to finance an infrastructure at this time of recession is through public-private partnership engagements.
Ibrahim Tudu has this. The National Assembly should criminalize abandoned roads by federal government and states. Governors deliberately allow death traps called roads in their states.
All right, and this one is simply changed to progress, and the tweet is, private funding of infrastructure development is a good option, but the challenge is tolling, which the NLC and TUC and others are always against.
Ayatunde has this tweet, our leaders lack development strategies.
And Rafael Numero Uno, that tweets, developing infrastructure in a recession should be prioritized so that we can sustain growth through its contribution like tourism.
Well, another one again from Ibrahim Tudo. It says the cost of exotic cars purchased by government should have been channeled to road construction and maintenance. First things first, roads before cars.
Okay, and there's a second tweet coming from Sani Michael Makoji, and specifically to Mr. Adebajo, who unfortunately has left. But it says, funding infrastructure is very limited and social safety net program is not yielding result. Where is our money going?
And we have this from Shitu 10. It says, Nigerians need to know that PPP isn't peculiar to us. Lagos had to force our way to succeed with Lekki Road and VI Ikoyi Bridge.
Again, Ibrahim to the tweets, all trunk A roads and busy roads should have toll gates. We can't eat our cake and still have it. We have already eaten our roads.
And Change to Progress. Says, Change to Progress has this tweet. Lawyers and judges also need to know that PPP has a lot of implications. Hence, granting injunctions against government-signed agreement is bad.
All right, gentlemen, those are the tweets, and we thank you. Please keep them coming. The program is still continuing. But let me just take a cue from one of the tweets here to throw my next question to the guests here in the studio. And it's the tweet from Mike Anyakwo, who is saying that the most viable option available to us, that's to Nigeria in time of recession, is through public-private partnership engagements. And we all know the culture, private partnership culture. It's not been very smooth, given, of course, what we're experiencing with the power sector. Let me start again with the former Deputy Governor of Abia State.
Thank you very much. You see, the beauty of investing in infrastructure during recession is that it serves dual purpose. One, it puts a lot of people back to work, and then helps in getting the economy back on track. And while doing that, you develop, the areas that are necessary. Listening to my colleague from London and Mr. Adebayo that has left, something quickly came to mind. Every country work towards developing infrastructure backbone. When that is done by the government, then the private sector people can take up. Talking about PPP, PPP works, but the problem here is that our system, even those in government that sign this agreement, look at projects that are run under PPP as the normal contract that they award, where they pay mobilization and all that. They expect those executing those projects to do things and, implement things the way those people that they've awarded contract and given mobilization do things. That cannot operate. It cannot work. If PPP must work, they must receive that support. They must receive that backing. We have had experiences in this country. You know the issue of the Ibadan-Lagos Expressway. We have a number of experiences, some personal ones, when it comes to PPP. But this is what has helped countries in other crime. At a time like this, when you are doing what you can do directly, you engage the private-public partnership to have a robust outing. But here, we are yet to perfect our PPP arrangement, to domesticate it so that it can work for us the way it is working elsewhere. Because our own system, the way we do things, must be, we must bring what we are doing back home. But the people must also realize that signing a PPP agreement and having an investor working on a project, bringing the funds and moving that project forward, it's not the same thing as signing an agreement, mobilize somebody to go and do a job.
All right, Dr. Akomas, thank you very much. Let's return to Honorable Nicholas Asai. We've kept you silent for a while now. Again, the road fund bill, some of the guests and my colleague Claire and I have also touched on the concerns that members of the public have expressed based on our national experience. Just as you will find ants being attracted to sugar, what guarantee is there that once you have a road fund that is available, that it will not be seen as a gravy trade? They say, look, that's a honey pot there. It's the next best thing to happen, and everybody goes in there, and ultimately, you don't get a real benefit. So, what assurance is there that indeed the fund will be deployed for the purpose for which it's intended, which is road maintenance?
Yeah, I have listened to everybody, and I'm happy from the contributions made. And you will see in the road fund, it will serve as a multiplier effect. Because why I say so is this. Sometimes we find it difficult to pay for what we use. And a lot of people have made contributions on issues of funding the road. And I believe that it's not going to be as usual because it's private driven. You have experts coming into the board You have experts who scrutinize applications, from other agencies who are involved in road constructions and maintenance. And definitely this money will be deployed to the needs of the people. If you are constructing a road from Abuja here down to Benin, there are needs. And they are scrutinized by experts, engineers of different professions, who are going to scrutinize, who are in the board. Members of those boards are private, coming from the private sectors, to scrutinize and manage this fund. And these funds are deployed to these roads according to needs. And I believe that it will serve a lot, because you see, when you open up the road, you are encouraging a lot of commerce and business activities. You are reducing the debt traps. People can travel easily to go and do their businesses and come back at the same way. Somebody can live in Lokoja and come to Abuja, do his business under a space of time. He goes back to Lokoja.
That's fine. So these are honorable side. Let's focus on it. We have seen a number of funds, established in the country in the past. Some of them have done well, but others still haven't done well. Because once you have a fund, it means that resources are channeled into that, and you now have a trust to manage it. The question is, based on what we know about ourselves, what guarantee is there that indeed the fund will be utilized ultimately for the purpose for which it's intended?
I say two good heads are better than one. Now, this is why it makes this say two good heads are better than one. Why I say so is this. The agency that will house this fund are not the same agency that does the constructions. The agency that does the construction, like FEMA's, Ministry of Works, and other agencies, we applied to get this fund, to add value to the roads that have been awarded. Now, during these applications, it is the duty of the board to scrutinize these applications, knowing fully well, putting a specification into consideration before these monies are deployed. Monies are not going to just be deployed. There's another agency, a board that looks into the application of the construction agency that have applied for such fund. And you see, the interesting thing about the fund is people have made suggestions in different ways. The toll gate we are talking about, I listened to my colleagues there. It talks about the toll gate. The toll gate is very necessary because the second bill talks about the toll gate. Another issue is additions and contribution from the Society of Engineers. Talks about licenses from registration of cars, and also tax from the importations of these cars should be included in road funds. That means there will be a large chunk of money, funds, that will be needed for our road deficit. And I believe that before, you don't have the EFCC as an agency that overlooks financial issues. You don't have the ICPC before, but they are doing a very good job in making sure agencies are checked. Corruptions, a lot of leakages are blocked. So these are areas we should have confidence in anything we are doing. And I believe that it's going to solve the problem because it has happened in third world countries. In Ghana, it happens. In Gambia, it happens. In Costa Rica, it happens. In Nicaragua, it happens. National Road Fund has, transformed most of this country in terms of the road network. And it can happen in our country. And I believe the deficit we are suffering from the road infrastructures will be fixed if this National Road Fund is passed.
Kingsley talked about the revenues that we got from toll gates, and of course that deposits we got from toll gates that were not judiciously utilized for roads and maintenance or construction. So how would this bill provide for judicious use of those funds? Is it also inclusive?
The board is to manage. The board is to manage the toll gate funds coming from the fund, not the Ministry of Works or not the FEMA. The board will manage, look at the applications from these agencies that construct roads, and scrutinize this application before these funds are deployed. It means if you are going to manage, you will deploy every system that you will use to collect this fund effectively. And for instance, you see, private driven, I've talked about the private drivens. They are representatives of Ministry of Finance. They are representatives of Ministry of Work that have also been in that board. So it's a question of the board incorporated a lot, including the National Road Transport Workers Associations are also going to be a member of that board.
Yeah,
I believe that if this caliber of persons are in that board, deploying money to certain needs of our roads will be judiciously applied.
Honorable Osai, thank you very much. I'm sure that, of course, our viewers will have their own opinions on what's going on. The questions we've asked obviously are intended to elicit responses from you, so that if there are other contributions from others to say, look, how do we make this more efficient? Because we all understand how this is going. From part of what you are describing now, we hope that it will not be another large bureaucracy where a great deal of the receipts into the funds will first be used, to pay staff salaries, local transport and tolls.
No, let me correct that.
We'll come back to you, Honorable Osai. But let's get the views of Mr. Roland Ataguba. You've listened to what Honorable Osai said. Are you sanguine about, the feasibility of a road fund, in helping the upgrade of our infrastructure going forward?
Thank you. I've listened to the Honourable, and he raises quite a number of interesting points. I think we have to go back, or take a step back, and ask ourselves some very fundamental questions, i.e., why are we where we are? Not so much why are we in a recession, even though that's germane, but why do we have such underdevelopment in terms of our infrastructure? It's not for a lack of money. If you speak to the people in the government, the emphasis appears to be on money. Whereas, if you look around you, you can see that there's a lot that is wrong with the way we manage public resources. Government embarks on projects, on contracts, awards huge contracts that span periods of years. It goes into a budgetary system that doesn't support the funding of those contracts. And what we have is a stop-go type of situation. In 2011, I think, or 2012, we advised a Presidential Projects Assessment Committee that was reviewing or taking an inventory of federal government projects. We found that there were 12,000 outstanding federal government projects or contracts that had been awarded, some as old as 30 years, that had been uncompleted, some abandoned. And you find institutional mediocrity, you would find personal interest in the conceptualization of some of these projects. These are some of the fundamental issues that affect the way we deliver these projects, and that hasn't changed. So whilst we may succeed in appropriating funds or even securing funds for these projects, what is fundamental is how do we manage them for delivery? How accountable are the managers? And it's a big, huge issue that we've got to contend with here in Nigeria. And until we find a viable way of delivering these projects, we would continue to struggle. Yes, PPPs have been mentioned as an alternative, but PPPs alone cannot sustain our infrastructure needs. One, because for PPP as a procurement route, the project has to be commercially viable. No private sector investor is going to put his money into a contract or into a project that's not viable for him. He needs to make a return. Now, government's obligation to the people is bigger than that, and there are contracts or projects that government need to embark on, or that the people need, that we need as a country, that would not be commercially viable. And so those must be handled by government. It is whether government can find a way of delivering projects in such a way that there is integrity and that they are sustainable. Because it's one thing to build a road, for instance, and forget about how you maintain it, or to think of the cost just in terms of the cost of developing it. You have to look at the cost holistically. It's got to be the whole life cost. How much do you spend on maintenance? If we had those kind of considerations, maybe we would not have such poor infrastructure as we do.
Mr. Tagoba, thank you very much for your response there. But just before we take the next set of tweets that have come in, let's quickly take your response, Honorable Nicholas Asai. You wanted to respond to...
Yeah, really, I wanted to respond because the reason being that I appreciate his comment, or the fear in which he expressed. But we have to look at it differently. Nigerians of yesterday is not Nigerians of today. I would believe that there are more accountabilities in government. And I believe that those issues are already being handled in terms of certain areas that has been embedded in the bill, clearly stated. You find out that the agency that award are not the agency who is going to deploy the money. Another agency is going to oversee, the award based on specifications of the other agencies that have awarded. So there's a check in terms of blocking the leakages. In terms of, there's also enough fund. There's also enough fund to be deployed. For instance, you see a budgetary provisions where you need up to 800 billion naira to be able to address issues of road infrastructure. And you are seeing a budgetary provisions of 20 billion. How can that solve a problem? It takes years and years, probably 15 years, to be able to address such a road constructions.
All right, Honorable Nicholas, thank you. Kingsley raised a concern about how the money will be, revenue proceeds will be utilized. Are you going to first settle the salaries and the heads of members of the board? But
no, I think that the words are handles are embedded in the bill, about 3% of the total fund. But you see, the minister made a suggestion that the 3% is high. Now we can reduce it to probably 1.5%, which the committee is also considering in terms of reducing the bureaucracy so that you have more funds to be able to deploy to route.
Right.
So those are the inputs of the people who attended the public hearing, which is good.
Thank you. Let's quickly take the next set of tweets that we have received. Kingsley.
All right, we have this from Amos Julius. It says, we need leaders to work hard and be accountable. Infrastructural growth will be a success by not duplicating the roles of ministries.
And Clifford Agwegu tweets, infrastructure building is a continuum. Recession imposes pressure, but with prudence and smartness, this can be handled.
And Sir Joe Udi has this tweet. It says, rail transportation must be given priority in this country. Our transportation mode needs to be revolutionized.
And Bruce Apama, homegrown technologies should be encouraged to boost local development, thereby leading to technology advancement.
And Joe Afolayo says, in financing infrastructure in Nigeria, let us revisit the recommendations of the National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan.
And a better Joseph, I'm Joseph from Lagos. Revenue is good to help government, but are they going to use the money well? That's the question.
And then Musa Jida, it is infrastructure that creates employment, not federal civil service.
Ume Chimezie tweets, there is never a time when fund will be enough. The available one must be used based on careful analysis of our priorities.
All right, those are the tweets that we can take in the meantime. But just to go over to our guest, Dr. Chris Akumas. We've been speaking, and of course, generally, you guests, you've touched on the responsibilities of the federal government and the perceptions that we're dealing with the federal government. Let's bring it down to the subnational level. State governments, we have seen some of them have approached the capital market, to borrow funds for infrastructure development, for projects that sometimes you have to look for the evidence to be sure that those projects really exist. And if, therefore, the federal government decides to go out borrowing now and it succeeds with $30 billion, there are restrictions now on states going to borrow, unlike what we had in the Second Republic. But at the subnational level, what guarantee is there that seeking to borrow or seeking to bridge infrastructure deficit can be judiciously met by seeking to borrow? Because part of the crisis that the states are facing is that they issued all kinds of ISPOs.
Thank you very much. Just before I get into that, the general concern about this bill is not the beauty of crafting how funds and revenues will be generated and brought into the policies, how to manage it and how to... When I spoke the first time, I said sustainability. We have had PTF, we have had DFRE, we've had all sorts of things with certain percentages. And some of the agencies, like what you're talking about, board, there are agencies in this country today that are supposed to help propel development or one scheme or the other. They earn better than those that are actually, generating and those that are supposed to work with the fund. So the bill, we must look at that generally, and it's very important to look into that. Now, talking about the sub-national sector, it is an irony that we have this problem. Most states today have difficulties paying salaries because monies were borrowed but not utilized for the purposes of that borrowing. Now, if you look at some of those issues, you'll be shocked if you go through the list, because the capital market and indeed the debt management office that insists on certain things ensures that a list of projects are submitted and timelines even developed. But thankfully, most of those projects with very beautiful economic analysis, the returns on those projects and how fast they will now generate funds to pay back. You go back, you don't see them, because once the money is released, and that is the issue we're talking about here, once the money is released, people go and sit back. They don't follow up, they don't track it. Ordinarily, for such projects, one should be able to monitor at the touch of a key on the computer what the progress is, how far they've gone, and how well this. And again, our indolence.
Dr. Koba, I'm afraid I have to stop you here because we're out of time. But quickly, because we must take our last question from Dr. Atakuma. Present governors, are now constructing airports. Why is that? Is that fashionable?
What is fashionable about that? I said we must develop our infrastructure. We must focus on the need, not on want, not on desire. You don't do things just because others are doing it. What benefit would that be? What economic growth would that give to the economy of the state?
Okay, I just wanted your clear perspective on that. But Mr. Taguba, quickly now, we have a deficit of almost 6 trillion naira infrastructure deficit, and we need money, of course, to develop that. It's not just the railways, the roads, power, education, and all that. And some people are saying, look, why don't we utilize, idle funds? And they have pointed again at pension fund. Is there anything challenging, difficulty in having these spend administrators invest some of these funds, in long-term, high returns yielding projects? Is there any difficulty in that?
I'm a project manager. I'm not a finance expert. I think Mr. Adebajo in Lagos would have been able to assist us there. But notwithstanding, I work with these people and I have a fair idea of what they do, the financial engineers. To answer the question, I'm not sure about the structure of the pension industry here and why their funds are not available. But these sort of funds must be available for investment. And whatever mechanism is required or necessary should be adopted, largely because our sources of funding are limited in Nigeria, and we don't appear to be versatile enough. Too much reliance is placed on government funding everything, and I think we have reached that crunch point now where it is evident that government can't fund most of the things that it needs to do. Having said that, we need to be clear that the reasons why government needs to invest and the reason why it needs partners are things that are understood and realizable. But fundamentally, we need to get back to ensuring that monies appropriated are actually used for the purposes for which they have been appropriated. And our legislators should ensure that through their oversight functions, that they ensure that the government itself meets its obligations, i.e. does what it says it will do. I think those are very fundamental things and that we need to address to move forward.
All right, Mr. Roland Ochole at Tagoba, MD Bethlehem Green Infrastructure Limited and MD of PSO Project Limited and Infrastructure Delivery Consultants in Nigeria. We'd like to thank you for your time on our program.
Thank you very much.
We also like to thank Honorable Osai Nicholas Osai, Chairman House Committee on Ethics and Privileges. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And finally, but certainly not the least, is the former Deputy Governor of Abia State, Dr. Chris Akomas. Dr. Akomas, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we go on to our companion segments, and we're taking sports right away. There's news about tennis. That's the year-ending ATP Masters taking place in London. And the Murray won, same thing with Novak Djokovic, both now number 1 and number 2.
Nigeria Professional Football League (NPFL) giants Enyimba and Kano Pillars have been listed among 10 clubs that will feature in this year's edition of the pre-season tournament, the Gold Cup. According to General Coordinator of the tournament, Tunde Shamsuddin, the pre-season competition built for the Dikwa Dina Stadium in Ijebu-Ode is to help the teams test their players ahead of a new season likely to kick off in December or January. Shamsuddin said the tournament will be of high level and is basically to ignite the spirit of the game. He added that NPFL outfits Lobby Stars, MFM FC, Niger Tornadoes, Sunshine Stars and newly promoted Remo Stars, as well as lower tier clubs like Crown FC and Supreme Court FC will feature at the tournament that